Welcome back to Common Ground. For many young people, the transition from school to the workplace can be a shock. Here in Jamaica, that transition can be especially challenging. Data from the Statistical Institute of Jamaica shows that youth unemployment has historically remained significantly higher than the national average, even though the overall employment rate has improved in recent years. But even when young people do get into work, they still have trouble navigating that world. New questions emerge, such as, are unpaid internships fair? How do you negotiate your first salary? And how do you set boundaries in the workplace? Today on Common Ground, we're exploring the realities of entering the workforce as a young professional and what it really takes to thrive in it. I'm your host, Daniel Mullings. Let's find common ground. Now, I'm joined today by Ms. Chantal Artwell, and you are an HR professional with lots of experience in people, culture, workforce management, and even a evening scholar. Chantal, we're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
I want to jump right into it. Right. What are the challenges that you're seeing as an HR professional when young people are entering this world of work?
We don't understand that there are things we just never learned in school that's going to allow us to thrive in the world of work. Now, you remember going to school and you go up and you are against 3 other people doing a speech, right? And you gave the best speech. At the end of the day, when you do that, you are awarded, right? Now, that's competency speaking. When you go into the world of work now, you could have 100 million degree, right? But the competency alone won't carry you to where you need to get to grow in the company, to be able to, be a part of the conversations and so. So I'm thinking when young people go into the world of work, I'd want them to put in the back of their heads that there are things that they're going to need to unlearn also to make sure that they're thriving in the world of work.
So tell me, what are some of those things? Like, what are the practical skill sets that employers are looking for when a young person is coming in?
I want to step back just a little and say that I want young people to first have the skill of going into a workplace and just observing. First.
Just observing.
What
are they looking for?
What they're looking for is the culture. The unwritten rules. The things that they don't give you in the handbook. Who makes decisions? Who speaks out in meetings? And when these people speak out in meetings...
Who is listening?
Who is listening, right? And how do people respond to these people? I also want them to look at, who is the ringleader? When I say ringleader, it's usually sometimes that even the person of managerial status is usually somebody who's sitting at the back of the class who people listen to when they say, hey, everybody be quiet, right? So I want them to understand how the environment works first.
Okay.
And then they can now tailor how they operate in that space, because it's important for us to understand context. Right? When you're in school, it's totally different. When you're in the world of work, there are people with 20 years experience who have been here before. But you just can't come in and just change it, on a whim. You have to make sure that you understand what you're working with.
I really think that's interesting, because the other day I was doing a panel discussion talking about this very same thing. And they presented a question to us where they said, our generation is very big on individuality and wanting to express who they are and so on in any space. And the question they asked us was, if you have Janet who wants a new job, maybe as a lawyer, but she's somebody who likes to wear colorful clothes, and she doesn't feel like if she goes into the workplace and she wears muted colors that is in keeping with the law profession, then she's almost like hiding herself or so on. What do you think about that? Because I look on it and I'm just like, boy, if Janet want to work, Janet, I forgot dress the part. So what do you think?
I agree with you, but here's the thing. The other day I was telling somebody that I have multiple Chantals. My workplace knows Chantal, the professional.
Right.
And then outside of that, there is Chantal, the personal person who enjoys going to the beach, who is big on getting her nails done. I won't necessarily show that side of me at work.
Right.
So it's important for us to compartmentalize our different selves. You have multiple Jamaicas, you have multiple selves. So I feel like and it goes back to one of the questions that you asked earlier, I feel like it's important for us to learn how to compartmentalize our different selves.
All right.
And it answers the question there.
So you mentioned then learning how to compartmentalize, and you mentioned going into the workplace and being able to observe what's happening before you
Right.
try and make any big
Right.
changes. What are the other soft skills that a young person needs entering the workforce?
Reliability. That's one. That's the first one. I think this is the biggest one, because when you go into the world of work initially, you have to make sure that people know that when you say you're going to do something, it's done. You know how Jamaica have this thing, oh, me soon come. And when you're not sure if it's a 2 minutes soon come or a 10 minutes or a 2 hours soon come. When you do that, people are unsure of you, of how you deliver. So you need to make sure that people know that when you say that a report is going to be on their table at 2 o'clock, it's on it from 1:55, for example. Not make 2 o'clock pass. Communication. How we communicate. We have to, there is corporate lingo or professional lingo.
Circle back.
That's it. Or I have a hard stop. So I'd want them to make sure that they're communicating properly and respectfully, because we are in the age of free living. And so we decide that, we're just going to say what we want to say, and we don't expect anybody to feel any way about it. We have to remember that we have different generations working with us, and
Right.
some people will take some things differently. So also, one, learning the communication style of the organization that you're working with, but also overall understanding how to communicate. If you're going to be late on something, it goes back to reliability. Team, I'm going to be late on XYZ because of XYZ. And this is what I'm going to do to make sure that I meet this, right? And I feel like another one is going to be ensuring that you are visible when you are in the world of work. And I feel like that's a soft skill. When we are in high school, again, all we needed was our competency.
Right.
But visibility being something that we master is, making sure that people understand that I can do the work, whichever way that you choose to do it, but make sure that people understand what you do and how you can do it.
Wow, thank you so much, Chantal. I think we're off to an amazing start. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back with more Common Ground right after the break. Welcome back to Common Ground. I'm your host, Daniel Mullings, and we're back in conversation right here in studio with Miss Chantal Artwell, an HR professional who's helping us understand how young people can really navigate the world of work. Now, Chantal, I want to ask you about, they say that us as young people, this generation, when we enter in the workforce, we're kind of lazy or entitled. Where's some of that terminology coming from? Why do HR people think that our generation is like that?
I'm going to stick up for my fellow HR person and say that it's not an HR thing, but I feel like it's a general thing. Have you ever heard every generation after is worse than the generation before? I feel like that's where it comes from. And especially because you do something slightly different, it's weird, so they don't know how to define it. And I feel like that's where it's coming from. That's where people are saying they're lazy and they're entitled. But also, our generation speaks out a little bit more.
That's true.
And when we it all boils down to culture. Jamaica has this culture where seniority, respect your elders. And if it's a case that somebody says something that you perhaps don't agree with at work, respectfully, of course, and you say I don't agree with that, it's not taken as I don't agree with it. It's more of, oh, but that one didn't have the manners, right? And when you also hear entitlement, I feel like our generation views things a little bit different when it comes on to work. So we are going to say, I think I'm going to have a conversation about salary. Some people don't like that.
Right.
And so they're going to say, why do you think you should get more pay? Mind you, we have more access to information than any other generation. And so we understand what Jill over there is getting paid.
Yeah.
And that I'm severely underpaid right here, especially because I'm doing the work of 2-3 people. Especially in this economy, a lot of companies can't afford to hire 4 people. And when you're looking at it, you're doing the job of 4 people.
Right.
And you're saying, I perhaps want to have a conversation about salary here. Or if it's a case that I decide, I don't really want to answer emails at 10 o'clock in the night when I'm supposed to be here with my family or reading a book.
Right.
That is where it's coming from, because it's different. It's different, so it's scary.
So you say it's scary, and I definitely understand that. I think our generation is looking for a bit more work-life balance. but it almost comes across as being less productive. I feel like it's interpreted like that sometimes. For example, not wanting to answer your emails at 10 p.m. or after midnight,
Right.
or not wanting to work sometimes on the weekends because you're trying to have that balance of rest and work. How do you think they can kind of navigate that? Because there's a way to do it, but respectfully.
Right. Set boundaries, but also not only say to your employer, for example, that, I'm not going to be answering emails at 10 o'clock in the night. Practice what you preach.
Right.
Because if it's a case that you constantly, you tell them every day, I'm not answering your emails at 10 o'clock in the night. But when them email it, yeah, respond. Right? It's going to come off as hypocritical, even for yourself. So I'll say, set some boundaries, respectfully, of course. But also, I'd want us to add a little flexibility in it, because there's sometimes when it really calls for it, right? And also ensure that you are doing it in the best way possible, because we have to understand that different people communicate differently. Some people rather use a different tone of voice or a different kind of wording. I like to tell my team that I like to use positively toned words so that people get less defensive.
Okay. I like that. In fact, maybe you can give us some examples of that, because maybe persons, watching at home would like to be able to, emulate what you're saying. What's a way you can spin it positively? Like maybe you're in a salary negotiation right now and you want to ask for more money, you feel like you're being underpaid. What's a way you can positively spin that?
Spin it. I'd want for us to go in, first of all, with our value. And that is us not going into the conversation when we're fed up. And we decide, say, if they not raise my pay today, I left them work. Right? I'd want us to be strategic people.
All right.
So we're not going to start when we're fed up. We're going to start a long time. We're going to start from the start of the work, perhaps, right? Or when we realize that it's time for us to move up. So we have to start the work before we get to the conversation. So when you get to that conversation, for example, you know that they're going to say, oh, but, we don't have the money. So again, you're going to make sure that you do your research. They don't have the money, the physical cash. Them never tell us, you cannot get an extra day off.
Okay.
Right? They're not going to say, okay, you can't get a higher health insurance. So go in with your backups. Don't just go in firing, hey, if you don't give me the raise, me not come back on work, because you're frustrated. People say things when they're frustrated.
Right.
So ensure that you manage your emotions before going in. And then watch the body language, for sure. If they're defensive, then you're going to need to make sure that, what you're saying, again, this is where we go back to observation. We're going to understand how the company or the person pushes back when somebody pushes back at them. Right? So at this point, now we're going to say, the company is really good to me, and this is the value that I've made over the years. Not that my rent has increased and I need an increase right now.
That's a personal problem.
That's a personal
That's not a company problem.
Go find somewhere cheaper, for example. But here, you're not going to lead with the personal problems. You're going to lead with the value that you give and you bring to the company. That's what we need to focus on, and not the individual.
That's a very, very valuable point. Now I want to go into, all right, let's say you're feeling overworked and underpaid. How do you kind of figure out if this is exploitation or something valuable for you to still stay in, even if it's not ideal?
I'd say do a pros and cons and see who benefits the most.
Okay.
When it reaches exploitation is when you realize that there's nothing in it for you. Nothing. No path or promotion, no extra money, no rest, no nothing. And it's where you realize that you are doing so much for the company. You're losing all your selves. You're losing your professional self, your personal self, and your private self. So when you go home, you're so tired, you can't eat the ice cream that you love. When you go into the workplace, you're so mentally drained to the point where you go into the bathroom and you shake. Those things, I believe, is pointing to it's not an equal thing here. You are being exploited.
Right.
What you do for the company is 5, 6, 7, 8 people work when and it's not appreciated. It's not appreciated with word or kind. That's how I'd say, you'd understand. Of course, when you, on the flip side now, when you realize that it's a demanding work environment, for example, you realize that you're growing and you have clarity. When you speak, they listen to you. They have feedback. If you say, hey, I think we should probably get a coffee machine because I'm a little tired. The company says, all right, if that you want, let's see how we can work towards getting that. So it's a two-way street here. It's not just like you giving and losing all yourselves.
So looking at the balance of it.
Right.
And we can take that into as well, looking at this is a big question that always comes up about doing unpaid internships. Ooh. Is that valuable for especially as a young person starting out? Should you look at unpaid internships or no, they must cover something for let you get there?
I'd say it is very valuable. Unpaid, if that's what you can get at the moment, it's very valuable. But I'd want us to also look at, again, what value does it really bring? Because if I'm doing an unpaid internship, because remember, I have to pay taxi fare to get there. I have to buy lunch. There are so many expenses on my end. But when I go there is no way I am gaining anything, no knowledge, no perhaps leading into a real job, a paid opportunity or anything. Yeah, there's nothing for me there. I am doing the work that if the company were to hire somebody, they'd have to pay them. That is where we talk about exploitation right there. But there is value in unpaid internships, and usually you see schools doing it. Right. They send you out as part of the end of your program or so on, value. Because then you understand how to use a particular software that, when you go into the world of work, it's going to increase the value that you bring. And what it does here, it also increases how much you can ask for in your salary negotiations and so on, right? So you see that there is value for you, even if it's right now, you don't see the exact value, but you know that there's value coming.
Thank you so much, Chantal. I think you're highlighting that, there's value outside of just monetary gain. Like we can look at the other benefits that come with an unpaid internship.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be right back after the break with more Common Ground. Welcome back to Common Ground. We're so excited to continue this conversation with Miss Chantal Artwell, an HR professional. And Chantal, I want to start off with a little bit of a game now, right? Because we've been having a very deep discussion about the workplace and how to navigate it as a young person. Let's do a little game, all right? So it's called red flag or green flag.
Okay.
I'm going to give you the scenario. You just tell me if it's a red flag or a green flag, and we'll break it down a little bit when we get to the discussion.
Okay. All right.
All right. First one, starting a job without a contract.
Ooh, red flag.
An internship that is unpaid but promises exposure and networking.
Green flag.
All right. Leaving a job after the first year.
Ooh. I'm going to plead the fifth on this one.
Plead the fifth, all right. Dating a coworker in the same department.
Red flag.
People won't like that one.
No.
Being asked to do tasks far outside your job description for the experience.
Oh, for the experience. It's doing something for you, green flag.
Mm-hmm. A workplace where employees are discouraged from discussing salaries.
Ooh, red flag.
Red flag.
Mm-hmm.
A company offers a dedicated budget and time off for your professional development.
Green flag.
And your boss following you on social media and commenting on personal posts.
Red flag. Red flag. Red flag.
Being asked in an interview if you plan to have children soon or if you're married.
Red flag.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're hearing Chantal, you're giving us some insight. So let's dive into some of these topics, right? Because as much as it's, we're looking at it from that red flag, green flag, high level.
Right.
Let's dig deeper into it a bit. So the first one, there are lots of different power imbalances in the workplace. And one instance where this comes up sometimes is workplace relationships, right? What kind of advice do you have for the people? Because sometimes I'm go to work and I see the cute man or the cute girl and decide say them I'll go, get into a relationship. What should they be mindful of?
I'll first say I've seen it work. I've seen it work before and it's worked beautifully for people.
Okay.
But also, I'd want to caution because what then happens if the relationship doesn't work? Mm-hmm. Remember, you have to report into this person. You'll have to see this person, perhaps get into another relationship, how you'll feel about it.
Right.
First, I'd say make sure that everybody's on the same page initially. What are the boundaries? What happens if it's a case that we don't work? What happens if we do work? Do we mix work with, our personal life? When we come to work, PDA, is not a thing. How do we feel about, making it public at work? Specifically because you have to navigate certain things. If the person is your boss and you have other people on the team and you get a promotion, somebody is perhaps going to say, oh, it's probably because they're together. How do you feel that, that these are some of the things that might come up because of the relationship that you have? And again, I'm not saying that I've never seen it work before. I have seen it.
Just things to be mindful of.
You have to really be mindful and be practical, because we're not living in a euphoria.
Right.
We have to make sure that we operate in a space with other people in it.
Thank you very much for that. So I also want to look at then, all right, outside of relationships, now we're looking at your professional relationships. Right. Especially, I think coming into the workplace, it might be a little tricky sometimes to deal with managing up, like managing your boss, right? What are some tangible or actionable strategies young people can have for navigating that relationship with your boss? Earlier you said you have to be, good on communication and be reliable. What else do they need to be thinking about?
Understanding who your manager is, because remember, the manager has 1,050,000 things to do just like you. So there are some times that they're going to forget.
Right.
So, for example, we were talking about earlier asking for a raise. You have to do some of the work. It's not a one-way street. It has to come out. It has to come out where you do some of the work and they have to do some of the work too. And if it's a case that you're not agreeing with something, have a respectful conversation. Hard conversations are hard to have, but we must do it in order to make sure that we are not only thriving, but we're managing the relationships that we have in the workplace also. So have a conversation. Don't just hold up something in your heart, Tell them how you feel and how they can help you to get over it.
Nice. And what are some ways that we can also kind of set boundaries in the workplace? And what kind of boundaries can we, be sharing with our manager or team members overall?
For example, please, I'd rather to not, get an email at 10 o'clock in the night and you asking me for a project that's due at 9 a.m. to be done in the middle of the night.
Right.
I'd rather you not do that, Or my weekends. My weekends are mine. And again, this is where we're compartmentalizing our personal self and our professional selves.
Right.
We're going to look at, if it's a case that I need to take my vacation days because I need to rebuild myself, communicate to say, hey, I'm really burnt out. And at this point, this is not where communication comes in. For me to do the work that I'm capable of, I need to recharge. And this is how you're telling them what you're going to do and how it's going to benefit not only them, but also the company. They're going to look good when the outcome, the things, numbers start looking better because you're recharging your personal self.
Chantal, this has been such a fantastic conversation. Now, every episode, I always make sure we end with something positive and just a nice big word of advice to our young people. So what's your big message, your final message to young people who are entering and navigating the workplace for the first time?
Don't leave your growth, your movement up, anything upwards to somebody else. Ensure that you're getting that certification. Ensure that you're self-advocating. Ensure that you are making sure that the next steps that you need to make are in your hands. So ask questions. What do I need to do to get to the next level? And don't wait until somebody invites you there. You invite yourself and do it yourself. So overall, just make sure that you're looking out for yourself when you go into the world of work.
Thank you so much, Chantal, for being here on Common Ground. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've heard so many practical tips that we can take with us into the workplace. And I think we've also heard that we shouldn't just label the entire generation as entitled or lazy, but recognize that our generation has different priorities like work-life balance. So thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Common Ground. I'm your host, Daniel Mullings. See you next week.